Fernando Schreiner will be speaking about another two top challenges of FP&A these days: need for higher agility and flexibility, and need for systems and processes integration. Fernando, the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Olga. I would say that the pandemic is probably the closest event to talk about in terms of lessons learned with respect to the importance of having this higher agility and flexibility, but also about finance being a trusted partner and influencer across the organization, like Luis just talked about. No company on earth was absolutely prepared to effectively respond to the COVID-19 outbreak in its earliest days. So with coronavirus advancing horribly quickly at the time, we had to act decisively, and we did very swiftly. We made sacrifices to keep the firm healthy. It was really about making those difficult choices early, from reductions in salaries to virtual meetings, also going virtual meeting investments in technology. It meant flexibility, agility, even I would say psychology. It also meant transparent communication and scenario planning, and believe me, many of those, especially within FP&A. As well as leadership, the empathy and real understanding of the situation. We had to tighten our belts, laser focus on collections since cash is king, and so a great client connection. So finally meant really staying faithful to people first. So the question was, what ultimately drives performance? It's really about maintaining the long view and not letting what was happening at the time really change our vision, our long-term vision and strategy. So the vision is actually the way we measure the future of our practice in design, and the long view, our sense of purpose, basically. So many sacrifices were made by so many of our colleagues at the time to make sure we could weather the COVID storm. We took, for example, salary reductions. We reduced the hours of many of our colleagues. We furloughed others when we knew there was not enough work. And even we made difficult decisions to lay off some of our friends and colleagues. And finally, we know we had many team members who were having to balance things like childcare, homeschooling, elderly parents, and other work from home challenges, not to mention actually the mental strain we're all under. Finance was deeply involved in scenario planning and analysis to help the leadership team make those well-educated decisions. That was very important at the time, and is still important up to these days. So that being said, in order to stay really ahead of the time, we did not sit around wringing our hands. We basically started acting even before COVID. So beginning the summer of 2019, we continued stress testing our long-term retirement obligations, for example, to ensure we would have the liquidity to pay them out, even in a severe downturn. The executive leadership team at Gensler, for example, we communicated often and transparently. We found new platforms, ways to communicate, even with one another. So we focus on our our one firm culture, as we usually talk about, while bringing people together and gaining alignment across the firm about the need to act swiftly at the time. So we continue scenario planning, made decisions quickly, and allowed ourselves actually to even make mistakes. As I talked about, we didn't have this like a blueprint on how to do the pandemic. So we allowed ourselves to make mistakes along the way and learn from them. So that was very important. And we made difficult choices that affected all of us throughout it all. We kept our eyes, as I mentioned earlier, on the horizon, right, the long view. And we took steps to ensure that the firm remained financially healthy. So on my next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about what was the impact of all those actions. Above all, we have kept our people safe. As I said, it was #1 priority. So we've done our best to retain our best talent, and we made investments in technology that has put us out in front. At the same time, we are continuing to build our financial strength. So we took a large accounts receivable reserve that year for all the receivables that were over 150 days old, which retained earnings and gave us time to collect. So we put a renewed focus on the collection that I also mentioned earlier on. So we eliminated almost all discretionary expenses, and we appropriated, like basically took a reserve for earnings for future principal stock buyouts, so as not to negatively impact our next generation. In abundance of caution, we upsized our credit facility to ensure continued liquidity and availability of capital if needed. So now in the next slide, let's talk a little bit about shifting gears and talk about the importance and need for systems and process integration. So Gensler has been going through digital transformation for a while. We use a pretty robust human capital management platform for employee experience management, skills management, workforce optimization, and recruiting. Same applies to our client relationship management platform. We've been using it to sell like basically smarter and faster by increasing sales force productivity and revenue, keeping track of every client interaction, basically automating redundant tasks and admin work that goes with CRM, and creating more engaging marketing by sending targeted and personalized messaging and triggering messages based on client actions. So it's also empowering our practitioners to forecast. That's a very important step that happened by enforcing the usage of our CRM solution. Empowering our practitioners actually to forecast more accurately and making data-driven decisions. So once again, like we've come a long way to improve our budget and forecast process across the firm by implementing a robust business process management platform. Give you an example. 5 years ago, Gensler was doing P&L planning across 50 offices that roll up to 10 regions. We're doing revenue planning for 29 practice areas. That's how we look at our portfolio. And cash flow, all in Excel. So for lack of a better financial platform, we could only forecast twice a year. So now we have, 5 years later, a much better financial planning platform that was designed at scale, important aspect. Enables visibility, agility, and the collaboration across the business to accelerate revenue growth, expand our margins, and better manage risk as well. So it's been used across the firm for P&L planning, absolutely across the firm. We use for workforce planning, we use for operating expenses, we use for capital expenditure, cash flow, and also different axes of the firm. We have also implemented a much better expense management platform over the last few years that has been fully deployed across all 50 offices in 16 countries where we operate. So those are all great tools that serves, I would say, a particular purpose. However, we realize that they would be even better and much more insightful if they were integrated. So for instance, Gensler is a global architecture design and planning firm with over 6,000 people. So it's a professional services firm. So our recruiting data and all the respective steps in the recruiting process sits in our HCM platform. So it's very important and insightful data for our short-term and long-term workforce planning process. So therefore, what we've done is we've started looking to much better integration between our HCM and BPM solutions, make sure they talk to each other, if you will. So that goes for revenue forecast as well. It's done in our BPM platform, like I talked about, but the entire sales pipeline sits in our CRM solution. So guess what? We needed to look into integrating or provide a much better integration between our BPM and CRM platforms. Another great example would be our procurement platform that help us track things like software licenses across the company. Another great opportunity to be integrated with our BPM platform. So again, it's like basically what this slide is showing is that all those solutions are pretty useful and insightful, but they're much better if you integrate them to provide better outcome for each one of those solutions and platforms. Thanks so much.